Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I am really excited about today's guest. I have Will Weinraub on the program. He is the founder of OnChain Studios, which is the parent company of Cryptoys. Will, you and I first met, I don't know, a couple months ago, probably at this point, and you ran me through the premise of Cryptoys, and I was just very taken with it, very impressed. We'll obviously dive into all of that. This is going to be a fun episode, though. I think I don't know how much my audience already knows about you, but I'm excited to hopefully introduce you to a new group of people because what you're doing is very cool.
Thank you, Carly. I'm such a huge fan of the show, so it's just great to be here and jam with you on all things NFTs, crypto, wherever we want to go.
Our faves. Awesome. We'll dive into all of it. I want to start with the idea for Cryptoys because I think the story is just fantastic and really illustrates why I love this idea. But before we get into all that, I do have two things for folks, which is, one, if you're a fan of the show, please subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on the podcast app, subscribe. Will, are you looking at your phone, seeing if you're a subscriber, want to go subscribe right now?
Subscriber.
Yeah, okay. And then the second is that before we dive into all this good stuff, we do need to hear a word from our lovely, lovely sponsors.
Immutable X is the layer 2 platform for crypto gaming. Immutable offers massive scalability with up to 9,000 transactions per second and instant transaction confirmation. No more gas fees, no more waiting around for your transaction to clear. Immutable's zero knowledge rollup finally unlocks the world of crypto gaming. Immutable X is the only gas-free NFT minting platform with over 26 million NFTs minted, all with zero gas fees. With the power of Immutable, gaming developers don't also need to become smart contract developers. They just need to plug in to Immutable's API and instantly start unlocking the full potential of crypto assets inside of games. This is why world-class companies and projects have decided to deploy on Immutable X, like GameStop, Ember Sword, Planet Quest, Illuvium, TikTok, and many more behind the scenes. So start building your game on Immutable X today at immutable.com.
MetaMask is the leading Web3 wallet to get you access to everything you need in Web3. If you're just getting started on your NFT journey, you need MetaMask. And if you need to fund your MetaMask account in order to buy that NFT that you've been eyeing, well, now you can do that directly through MetaMask. Just click the blue buy button on the home screen. Personally, I'm mad that I've spent extra gas fees transferring money from Coinbase to MetaMask in order to buy NFTs. I've been using MetaMask directly, and it is so much better. You can also buy stable coins and native tokens from Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, CeeLo, and others, and you can do it directly with your debit card, your credit card, through Apple Pay or Google Pay. And there is now an improved buying experience on MetaMask Mobile. You'll only see tokens that are in your region, so it's personalized to you, and you'll get real-time quotes, so you know you're always getting the best deal. If you haven't downloaded MetaMask yet, what are you waiting for? Go try it out. You can learn more about buying cryptocurrencies with MetaMask at metamask.io/buy-crypto. Okay, Will, describe the aha moment for Cryptoys, or sort of the founding, incepting idea for Cryptoys. I love this story, and it'll illustrate what Cryptoys is really well and why I think it's so cool.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do it. So a bit of a serial entrepreneur. My last company before I started this one was called Live Ninja, basically a video chat marketplace. And, we raised some venture capital, ended up selling that company in 2017 to IDT Telecom. And had to earn out with IDT. And, this was around 2017 going into 2018. And, just always been into tech and early adoption of things. And, I'm a big Fred Wilson fan, Union Square Ventures, and, subscribed to his blog post. And I remember one day he published a blog post talking about this new company that's investing in called Axiom Zen. They're kind of renaming to Dapper Labs, and they got this thing called CryptoKitties, and it looks like kind of a gimmick, but it's not. Trust me, NFTs are going to be a really big thing. And usually when Fred Wilson talks, you tend to listen. So I took note of it. I actually bought a few CryptoKitties around that time, just kind of playing around with NFTs and what they meant. And at that same time, my daughter was really into this thing called blind bags or surprise unboxing, basically the hottest trend in physical toys. I have 3 kids. My 2 oldest, currently 9 years old, my daughter, and 8 years old, my oldest son, Kevin. So a few years back, they were just addicted to this concept called blind bags. So basically what they are, they're these physical toys. You buy them for like $20, $30 at like Walmart, Target. Kids buy them, they take them home. Inside is a random toy. And some are more rare than others. Kinds of reminds us of some very familiar concepts.
Remind you of anything? Yeah.
So basically, one day I'm working from home. This was like early 2018. My daughter screams from the playroom with excitement. And she's like, "Dad, come quick, come quick. Oh my God, I got it. I got the ultra rare. Finally got the ultra rare. And I go to see what she's doing. And she's holding up this little glittery gold plastic toy. And she looks at it for like 10 seconds and then throws it in the bin with all the other ones just collecting dust. Because we were spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on these things. Because again, this was the hottest trend in physical toys and my kids were absolutely addicted to them. So, as soon as she said the word ultra rare, that was the big light bulb moment for me, because a few months back, I was learning about this concept about NFTs and hearing about CryptoKitties and whatnot. And I thought to myself, I said, oh my goodness, here is this multi-billion-dollar segment of the toy industry that's predicated on collectability and scarcity. We can now do these digitally for the first time ever, thanks to NFTs. So I go to my daughter and I said, sweetheart, what if I were to make you the digital version of these toys that you like collecting so much, where you can collect them, chase after the rare ones like you're doing now, but then when you get them, you could actually do things with them, play games with them, interact with them, do different things. Would that be something you'd be interested in? And she's like, oh my God, Dad, that'd be amazing. I'd love that. So I thought to myself, I'm like, all right, let me build this little side project with my daughter. This was early 2018 when NFTs were just kind of starting to emerge a little bit. And I thought to myself, okay, this could be like a little father-daughter kind of bonding experience, teaching her about tech and entrepreneurship, and I can make this fun little toy for her. So we got together, my old co-founders at Live Ninja. We banded back together, and then our friend Freddie joined. Freddie had experience at Disney and Konami games before doing some other stuff in the gaming world. And we created this little side project for our kids called Cryptoys. And this was, again, 2018. So nobody really, knew too much about NFTs at the time. So I remember going around and showing people early concepts of it. And they were like, hey, Will, what are you doing? You just sold your previous company. What are you doing next? And I'm like, not sure exactly what I'm doing next, but let me show you this digital panda that I'm working on. And they're like, I'm like, it lives on the blockchain. And they're like, sure it does. It's like one of those moments where like, these digital pandas, are they in the room with us now? Kind of thing. Yeah. And so we just did the little side project for our kids, 2018 to 2020. Nobody really cared. And then obviously the market started to turn and there was some real interest in the project, and off into the races we went.
In the early days, and maybe it sounds like almost early days being these first 2 years, was it literally just like you partnered with an artist to draw some cute bears, or like talk about what you really built out as a product in those early days?
Yeah. So I remember we were really inspired by CryptoKitties. So like, first of all, it was just me, Emilio, and Alfonso, the three of us, and neither of us, or all three of us, frankly, are not artists. So we needed someone to help us. So we went on Fiverr and we hired a freelance artist to help us make these two-dimensional characters, basically little cartoons, different. They were like CryptoKitties. They look like, but just different animals and different variants of them. And we did it for like a few months. And then Emilio, my CTO and co-founder, came to me and he said, hey, Will, this project of yours is cool and all, but if you really want to blow this thing out of the water, I got a buddy of mine that I used to work with at Disney. He's now at Konami. He's doing a bunch of video game 3D artist stuff. Like, we should really bring him onto the team. So that's when we met Freddie, and he took the idea from like a 2D concept to fully 3D. And again, in 2018, there was no real like 3D interactive NFTs. That was really like one of the first of its kind. So it was kind of a novel concept back then. And that's when we really got started with the project.
And maybe you said this, or maybe it's obvious given where the inspiration came from, but at that point, did you have this whole unboxing reveal experience that was very much designed to be like the unboxing experience that your daughter was having with these LOL surprise dolls?
Yeah. So that was like the goal from the get-go, was to make it as toyetic as possible. As possible. It's a concept you'll hear me talk about a lot, is things being toyetic. Even though they're in the digital space, they have to be as analogous to the physical world as possible, because there's a lot of joy in opening up a toy and playing with toy and using your imagination and lots of different things that we could definitely translate to the digital world. But we wanted to stay true to that physical experience as well, harking back to like the golden era of toys. So the unboxing experience is such a key component in the physical experience. We wanted to have a great unboxing experience in digital as well. And as we see with NFTs, that unveiling moment, the reveal moment, is always a big thing as well. So it's a good kind of connection between what's popular in the physical world and the digital.
So I want to ask you about that, because I think talking to you, I've had sort of two interesting, arguably unlocks that I want to get into. But I first just want to emphasize for folks, like, I don't have kids. I'm sure a number of people who listen to my podcast don't have kids. So I really was not tracking this like LOL surprise dolls blind box concept at all. But my understanding now, having gone back to dig into it a little bit, is it really started with LOL surprise dolls. Was like the first, and it wasn't Mattel. I'm trying to remember the name of the
MGA.
It was MGA, toy manufacturers, whatever, that initially came up with this concept. And everybody turned them down. Like initially, I think Walmart turned them down or Target turned them down, being like, no kid's going to want to buy a doll they can't see. But it was really inspired by the Isaac something or other, MGA's president, seeing the unboxing phenomenons happening on YouTube, where these kids would get toys or iPhones or whatever, and they would do this unboxing thing. So he really began with sort of the end in mind of like, we want this to go be like a viral YouTube toy. And then, boy did he succeed. And at one point, the New York Times was profiling this, and it was like, they did like $5 billion on LOL surprise dolls in whatever it was, 2019, 2020. Are they still as big today? Or was this a bit of a fad that had a peak and is flaming out at all?
Well, I think they were an early mover in the latest wave. I remember like surprise unboxings has been a thing for a long time. Like, there's Kinder Eggs decades ago. There were Cracker Jack boxes where you'd find a toy inside cereal
boxes. Happy Meal
boxes.
toys in some
Happy
ways
Meals,
is a similar concept.
Right. But like what you pointed out, you hit the nail right on the head, right? Like they really got a hold of the whole YouTube unboxing trend, and they made the ultimate unboxing toy that people would want to film and then share and whatnot, right? So I know they were the hottest selling toy for a few years in a row, and I think lately some other stuff has kind of caught up to it. But nonetheless, they kind of set a big trend, and a lot of other people kind of followed suit and made similar stuff.
So something we might circle back to, which is how you think about longevity in this space that like moves so incredibly quickly. But we'll save that for end and future planning conversations. So here were the two unlocks that I felt like are things that kind of clicked for me when you and I first spoke, which is, the first is targeting kids. And like when we talk about the analogs to the NFT industry, we talk about like comic books. We look at Transformers, which started as a collectible toy and grew into a whole media franchise, and this concept of selling from the shelf, which I think was kind of big in the 80s, where you would sell these toys first and then build these franchises around it. Something Mattel is now diving into in a big way. We'll probably get into that because you've got a partnership with Mattel. And it strikes me that even Star Wars, like a lot of this stuff actually starts as something that is loved by children. And then as they become adults, they get nostalgic, or obviously, adults love Star Wars and things, but it's actually a kid's first thing. And it feels like not many NFT projects, if any, have really started with kids in mind. And so while on the one hand, what you're fundamentally doing is releasing cute animals on the blockchain, which we've now seen thousands of projects do, having this very unique angle and very specific targeted approach to it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what a light bulb, and why I think it's really exciting what you're doing. Do you agree? Is this something that's like under tapped, do you think, in the NFT community where people and projects aren't really thinking about kids first?
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about what we're doing, and again, we're building a digital toy company, so obviously, kids are a big part of our roadmap. But what we're really focusing is like family entertainment, like across the entire family, where it's something that parents and kids can enjoy together in unison, right? So, I think that's an important piece to recognize is, how do you kind of cross the chasm if you're doing stuff that is related to blockchain, NFTs, crypto, and involve kids in the right way, in a COPA compliant way, and all these different things that you have to consider? How do you do it correctly? Now, what I like to think about is how does collection starts? How do people become collectors? What does nostalgia look like? And how do you bond cross-generationally with your family and other folks? So like, for example, let's use basketball cards and football cards as an example, right? When I was a kid, my dad was really into collecting baseball cards. So I would walk by his office when I was 8 years old, and I saw that he had a bunch of baseball cards all like laid out on his table. And he said, "Hey, Will, come check this out." And then he showed me what were the rare ones, what were the rookie ones, how to collect them, how to, care for them, etc. And I enjoyed that so much that I got involved with collecting baseball cards. And to this day, I still collect cards. I mean, actually, I have, if you have some football cards here on my desk and things like that, because of the nostalgia that it reminds me of, back when I was a child. Now, the same thing's happening now with NFTs. It just was never built that way. So for example, parents in this last wave, right? We bought Cool Cats, we bought Doodles, we bought all these different ones, and parents are starting to bring their kids to the screen and say, hey, check out this Cool Cat, check out this Doodle. Do you like this one? Okay, this one's ours. We're collecting it together. And kids are starting to get involved. And this comes very naturally to kids because kids are growing up and, before they get a phone, they get iPads and they're playing games and they're collecting digital items. So to them, this makes a lot of sense. Okay, here's a rare digital item. I can collect them just like I'm collecting them in Roblox or I'm playing an Animal Jam or whatever the case may be. So for us, yes, we always wanted to make sure we created something really incredible for kids and what the next generation of toys and the next generation of play would look like. But we had to do that starting with the parents, introducing it to the parents, right? Through, safeguards about how do you safeguard a wallet? How do you introduce blockchain and NFTs to a kid? Having a parent-controlled wallet, making sure that they can transfer in the correct way and whatnot. So it was always a big part of what we're doing. But I would say we focus more so on building around the entire family as collectors together versus just marketing directly towards kids.
Mm-hmm. With that being said, this unboxing experience does kind of mirror, again, what kids in particular were gravitating towards with these like LOL surprise boxes. And this was the second unlock to me, but potentially. And the question again is, do you think this is something that's being underutilized by other projects where Mint Day is cool or Reveal Day is cool, but nobody's really tried to tap into, at least as far as I know, people on Twitter can come yell at me and tell me, no, what about this project? But like, again, the kind of YouTube unboxing, like this really like, kind of climactic moment of your reveal that's like super streamable and everybody wants to watch. And you're trying to tap into that, which I think is really interesting. Again, do you think that's undertapped in the space broadly today?
I think so. Absolutely. I think right now we're in the early innings, right? I think if we look back on this like 10 years from now, we look at like the PFP era and like that's kind of like inning one. Everybody was looking for PFPs and kind of static images and whatnot. And obviously we're going to see different use cases emerge. I think Top Shot to an extent had a little bit of that early on when the people were unboxing packs and sharing them on YouTube and whatnot.
And they, if you were queued up waiting for a drop, they would do fun activations. Like there was definitely a lot of interesting creativity there. Yeah.
And Dapper Labs, like I have a lot of respect for Dapper Labs. Obviously, they're investors in our company and we're building on the Flow blockchain, which we can get into a little bit later. Right. Yep. But like, they're real pioneers in the sense. And you hit this on one of your episodes recently, Carly, was like, this only becomes mainstream when we stop thinking of it first and foremost as an investment, right? Yep. That's the only way this ever hits the mainstream. Because right now it's a very speculative thing. You're hoping to buy, you're hoping to flip it. We've seen that with a lot of IP drops that, have happened on different platforms, right? Kind of the floors kind of sink once you take them out of the quote unquote packaging, you see what you get, and then you try to sell them on the secondary market because there's no utility. But that's what we're really focusing on is, yes, that moment is great because again, it gives you a taste of what it's like in the physical world. When you get a toy, you open it up, you don't know what you're going to get inside. You're doing that digitally, but then creating enjoyment and utility and entertainment and all the phases beyond that unboxing and the things you can do with it, I think is really, really critical. So we're really focused on those like moments of surprise, those moments of joy, and like constantly making sure that you get that when you have a Cryptoy, when you're able to interact with your Cryptoy and things like that. It's not just about that initial get and then flip. We really have like two big moments in the NFT space. It's when we get it and when we flip it. And there's so much more in between that we have to kind of build to really make this a mainstream thing that people are starting to accept more as things beyond just a speculative investment. So.
And you do it an interesting way that I want to ask you about. So the unboxing experience for Cryptoys, as far as I understand it, is they start off as these like Rubik's Cube looking toys. Yep. And then you can open the box, and in the box itself is what looks like a package, like a, like sort of a plastic packaging you would get for some toy in the physical world. And you can make a decision at that point. So at that point, you can see your Cryptoy, you can see some of its traits, and you can make the decision to keep it in that packaging or open it further and turn it into its 3D character that will have sort of an additional life and game life that we'll get into. Did I describe that experience correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have these things called Cryptoys cubes. Basically, you get a Cryptoys cube. You don't know what you're going to get inside. You buy them. You can buy them with US dollars. So take credit cards. So it's easy to onboard folks. You don't need a MetaMask wallet or crypto or whatnot. You get them. And then right then it's kind of boxed. Then it's an interactive unboxing experience where you're kind of rotating it. There's like clicks and clacks. And even though it's digital, it feels very tactile. And then once you open it, it's then revealed a wrapped kind of like a blister pack hanger box, like you would see like old school toys. that you used to get back in the 90s. It's in this blister pack, and that's when it's wrapped. So basically you can keep them wrapped and keep them in pristine condition in the physical packaging. And there's benefits to keeping it in the packaging, like staking style benefits that we'll be announcing soon, and other kind of gameplay components. And then you can decide, do I keep it in there or do I tap on it again? And if you tap on it again, the whole packaging will burn off and the Cryptoy will come to life. It'll jump out at you on the screen, and then you can interact with it. And
now it's really more like almost your playable avatar.
Correct.
So you use the word toyetic. I would argue you could also say skeuomorphic. It's very analog to something you'd buy in the world, like, the real world.
Yep.
Why did you decide to go that way as opposed to designing a totally new kind of metaverse looking unboxing experience?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. We're looking at like the patterns of play and how, kids are adopting it and also how adults are adopting it. So like, instead of thinking it also like an avatar, it's kind of like an avatar in a sense, but a lot of folks are saying this is the representation of me in the metaverse, right? When you think of like what like Yuga's building and like what other folks are building, saying, okay, here is me and this is what I want to look like in the metaverse. So I represent myself. Cryptoys is a little bit different. Cryptoys, you might have 40 Cryptoys in your backpack. Instead of calling it a wallet, we call it a backpack. So you might have 40 Cryptoys in your backpack, and you could take a number of them out and do different things with them. And the reason is, like, think about in an analog world, right? You can set up a playroom. You can have a bunch of different toys set out, different layouts, and do different kind of play patterns and whatnot. And if you see how things are evolving in the digital world, we talk about gaming. And if you look at like the gaming industry, like, you might look at what my son does after school, and he takes his iPad and he goes on Roblox. And we might think of that like, okay, he's playing video games, right? But it's not the video games that you and I used to play when we were kids. What he's really talking about is not like, hey, it's not like a shoot 'em up game or something like that. He's really saying like, hey, Benji, meet me in the corner and let's go build this out together. Or, hey, come check this out or follow me here. It's very much like an after school activity. Like, he's socializing in a virtual playground. And these are like the play patterns that are emerging. So it really doesn't make a difference if he's in the physical world with his friend or in the digital world. They're still playing in the same kind of communication style that they're used to. So for us, it was just like looking at those play patterns, and then how do we adopt that into a very toyetic lens, taking a toy, unwrapping it, and then, okay, what can I now do with this toy like you would in the physical world, giving them kind of fun things to do in the digital world as well. And the cool thing about doing it digitally is you're not bounded by the laws of physics. You're not bounded by like, hey, I just have this and this play set. You can constantly give them new experiences with that toy. So it's interesting. And then that's how we like to think about it, is to kind of go through that play pattern and build around that specifically.
My impression, and I'm worried I might be wrong about this, is that it's still sort of a Cryptoys is still sort of in beta in terms of being able to go and mint. It's not just like an active, live, evergreen present mint at the current present. Am I right?
Yeah. So we actually haven't launched publicly yet. We're about to start launching some private betas.
So I am right. Okay.
Yeah. So, for folks that are interested, definitely drop me a note. We're rolling out private betas, pretty soon, actually, shortly after this airs. And then we're doing a bunch of like licensing partnerships. Obviously, we announced something with Mattel, which we can get into, and some of their IP that's going to drop on the platform. But yeah, there'll be like kind of NBA Top Shot style drops that, we'll announce a drop. There'll be a certain inventory for that. You'll be able to get in queue and then buy your Cryptoy cubes from there.
So you've been building for longer than 99% of projects in this space. Why didn't you launch sooner? Did you look at Cool Cats being like, we've missed the window?
Yeah. So again, from 2018 to 2020, it was very much just a passion project, side project for our kids. And this is a big lift of a project. So we're doing like a bunch of different things. That kind of, one part we're a digital toys and collectibles company, one part we're a gaming company, and another part we're an entertainment company, because we're building like original IP storylines and an animated series actually behind the scenes here. So this is a humongous lift. And we always knew to really do this right, you have to raise capital. The markets have to be right for it. So again, from 2018 to 2020, we were just chipping away, and we all had full-time jobs. We all had full-time responsibilities and kids to feed and families. So again, just, from 9 p.m. to midnight, making a little progress. Then on Saturdays and Sundays, making a little progress. And we were just chipping away.
What specifically did that look like at that stage? There's like 3 of you, so you're limited in what you can really achieve as 3 people. You're not probably building out a full game engine at that stage. Like, what were you practically working on for those 2 years?
Yeah, so it was the four of us, and basically we were just working on an iOS app, and inside the iOS app had this unboxing experience, and you can kind of rotate it, and it's fully 3D animated and rigged characters. So again, just doing 3D art and animation and conceptualizing that, and then building the iOS app. And then on top of that, and there'll be some flavors of this that will launch as part of our roadmap, we built an NLP, natural language processing, and AI component to it as well. So you can converse with your Cryptoy, much like you would an Amazon Alexa or a Siri. You were able to do that on the iOS app. So we had this like little working prototype. Again, it was, just kind of basic. We were able to unbox your Cryptoy and then communicate with it, almost like kind of a new wave Tamagotchi in a sense, had some elements of it to that. And then we're like, okay, the next wave is kind of building more infrastructure and gaming around these toys so you could really play with it in different ways. And to do that, we knew we had to raise some venture capital. I had sold my previous company, and so did Emilio and Alfonso, who are my co-founders of that company. We had earnouts. Alfonso then left the company. He went to go work for Facebook. Emilio went to work for another company, et cetera. And timing just wasn't right. Again, the market, there was really no consumer interest in NFTs from 2018 to 2020. So it was just more of a passion project. And then it was really late 2020 when we saw with NBA Top Shot, things started to bubble back up. And then it was early 2021 where, there was just a lot of momentum. A lot of folks were interested in what we're building and this early concept. And that's really when we were able to raise some venture capital and quit our jobs and then do this thing full time. And that's when we were off to the races.
And so you intentionally, clearly didn't hype on, jump on just like the PFP craze and say, okay, you know what, we're going to release 10,000 Cryptoy looking things and get some money that way and whatever. Why did you make that decision?
I just think PFPs in general, it's a great use case of NFTs, but to me, like we talked about before, it's like inning one. I think, you want to create something. And for me, this started off as a project for my kids. And, when I think about this, like I really want to build like a generational company and something that, can stand the test of time. And look, I don't think PFPs are necessarily going to have like massive generational impact on these little 10,000, profile pic projects. Of course, you can extrapolate them and create different lores and lines and whatnot. But this all went back to the concept of toys. And you can ask yourself, you're like, all right, there's these amazing legacy toy companies that have been around for decades. So if you have the opportunity to create a toy company from scratch today, and it was digital first and NFT native, what would that look like? And it doesn't look like PFP projects where kind of everyone is a little bit different, et cetera. It looks like, hey, with toys, you have certain lines of toys. There are, some that are mass produced. There are some that are more limited edition, et cetera. And it creates this kind of environment where you can kind of customize them in different ways, buy accessories, get play sets, et cetera. So we really wanted to take that model, which is kind of tried and true in the physical world, but then expand on what works physically to the digital world and go beyond that. And I think it's just a better place to start and build something that's very long lasting and also bridges the gap from a Web3 audience to a mainstream Web2 audience versus just a kind of a PFP kind of style 10,000 profile pic limited project. So we wanted to go for something a little bit bigger foundationally.
I think this was, to not to be a broken record here, but like was part of what was so striking to me chatting with you is like, if you take the individual elements of what you're doing in a vacuum, they're not that dissimilar from what a number of PFP projects now are kind of saying they're trying to do, right? You have this kind of collectible, cute, visual thing. You have gaming, which we'll get into. You have, entertainment IP you're trying to build out. I mean, you could be describing doodles, frankly, with that. The difference is the intentionality from day one and the why from day one that functionally, when you look at how things get plotted out, how things get built, like how you build one on the other, like how you do different elements, actually in the details makes a huge difference. And, I almost feel like what a lot of these projects have to do is like retroactively kind of become the company that you've been since day one, which is really interesting.
Well, thank you for that. That's a huge compliment. And I think that's what's interesting about the space as we kind of turn into the next inning or the next chapter of these spaces is like before we started off with, these projects that are promising utility and entertainment down the line. It's like, hey, fund us, buy the mints, buy the projects. We'll give you entertainment and utility down the line as part of the roadmap. I think the next wave of projects, and we're certainly hoping to be part of that that next wave is start with entertainment and utility first and foremost, and then let the value of the project be a byproduct of the entertainment and the utility versus speculative value and then hoping entertainment and utility come down the line. So I think as a space, I'd like to think that we're all kind of maturing towards that. And I see a lot of other projects also taking that very seriously, which is, I think is healthy for the space overall.
Yep. So talk us through the timeline here, and then that'll be an entryway to dive into more of the specific elements of the game world and the lore and all of that. Cause I want to talk both macro and micro about, get your thoughts on all of that. In terms of, so you've got these betas that are going to roll out, which will allow people to do their first mints of Cryptoys and I assume make that decision between, do I keep it in this packaging? Do I, let them free? With that beta launch, are you going to have this arcade world? You can talk about, I know there's what is the timeline? What are you going to get during these betas and how long will it be to be this whole thing fully rolled out?
Yeah, great question. So again, this is a beast of a project. This is a very, cohesive and comprehensive roadmap. And you can kind of see the roadmap if you go to cryptoys.com and check it out at the bottom of the site. So the first thing, again, we want to get this out. We want to get this in early adopters' hands. We want to get feedback from folks and see what they like about it, what they want to see improved. So we're starting with a Genesis launch. There's going to be 30,000 Genesis heroes that we're launching. These are going to be our initial 3 characters, which are also going to be some of the most capable toys that you can do on the platform. So there's different like skill levels and power meters and stuff like that. And these will be some of the best of the best. And there's 30,000 and we're launching them in waves. So we're actually not launching all 30,000 at once. There'll be a wave of a couple hundred. There'll be a wave of like 500, 1,000, et cetera. And we'll go throughout these different waves and release dates. And initially, you'll be able to collect them. You can build out your backpack, et cetera. And then also you're able to unwrap them and take them out on what we call the block. And the block is like our test drive area. It's kind of like this Tron looking style grid. And you can see exactly firsthand that these are interactive toys. This is not something that's like speculative. Like we built an engine on top of Unity and a whole kind of environment. So be able to take your toy, unwrap the actual toy, place them on the block, and then fully interact with them and like spin them around, do a bunch of different things. And then by the end of the year, hopefully, we are working on 3 mini games right now that you'll be able to play with your character. Hopefully, I know things happen, but the goal internally is to launch these 3 mini games by the end of the year, so that you could then launch off of the block. You could launch these 3 different games and interact with your Cryptoys and have different play patterns, et cetera. And beyond that, there's so much that we're working on collectability. There's a mobile app coming. There is a NLP and AI component. We have 2 people full-time on the team that all they do is focus on NLP and AI. And the tests are absolutely unbelievable. We do tests all the time of us talking to these Cryptoys and them talking back, and it's just absolutely amazing. So much is coming through the pipe. But initially, it's the collectability aspects and then walking on the block, unwrapping them and doing that kind of thing. Are
you mirroring the LOL surprise dolls and resultant projects that came out of that in terms of price point? Like, are these $20 to $30? Where are you guys landing?
So the initial price point is going to be $39.99 per cube. People will be able to buy 5 Cryptoy cubes, when they get to the front of the queue. And we're actually giving a reward for the people that buy 5. We're actually giving what's called a golden ticket. And a golden ticket is an NFT that you'll receive, which basically we're doing a number of amazing drops next year in 2023. A golden ticket allows you basically to the front of the line priority access to some of these drops. So every time you mint 5 Cryptoy cubes, you'll get a golden ticket as well. So you can be able to be prioritized for some of these drops that we're doing in the future.
Very cool. What is the marketing strategy now? It strikes me that you're in this weird position. You said you're targeting families, but it is a very kid-friendly thing. But how much are kids really on the blockchain at this stage? How are you approaching marketing for all of this?
Great question. So we're starting to start, you have to be 18 or up to get on the platform, right? Because of registrations, COPA compliancy and whatnot, right? You're getting effectively wallets created for these accounts. So there's a reason, if you look at the lore of what we're building and a lot of like the storylines and some of the IPs we're working on, it's very nostalgic heavy. There's a lot of like cues from the 80s and throwbacks to Twilight Zone and Stranger Things and whatnot. So initially, folks have to be 18 or up to sign up. You'll be able to create these accounts. You can collect them. And then we're rolling out in early 2023 parent-controlled wallets so that they can create a sub-account and then allow the child to then log in with their own sub account and then use the assets in different ways. Maybe not transact with those assets, but play with the assets in different play patterns. So very much like if you're familiar with like Netflix or Disney Plus, you know, you have the parent account, which is unrestricted, but then you have the child account, which has like certain limitations. We have to take a similar approach. If you want to get kids on the blockchain and people under the age of 12 years old, you have to be very, very smart and thoughtful about it. So we're going through all these different guidelines and controls for parents.
Is this the first time, as far as you know, that this concept has been enacted, where there'll be this sort of sub-account style thing for kids?
I haven't seen that yet, you know. So like as far as Web3 goes, again, this is like a mainstream platform for us. We're not focused on like a niche kind of market in Web3 as much as like, oh, you know, we're so grateful for all the folks in Web3 and, you know, they've been such huge supporters of what we're building and, you know, we're counting on them to, you know, be early supporters of the project. We wouldn't be here without them. The only way this is successful and it turns into the company and the platform we want it to be is if it bridges the gap. And it's amazing to go to Comic-Con, for example, which we just went with Mattel, and hear about how mainstream consumers think about NFTs. We think, you know, oh, NFTs are great and it's the future and whatnot, but there's a conception about NFTs that, you like it or not, the public has. And we talk a lot about how we're going to onboard the next 10 million, 100 million people into NFTs and Web3. We have to fix that perception and educate people on what this is, because a lot of people, they see NFTs and they think cryptocurrency, they think ICO scam, they think all these things of the bad headlines over the past 3 to 4 years. When if you kind of just change the narrative and you'd be like, look, NFTs, all they really do is allow the internet to be ownable and digital things to be ownable. And collectors and like mainstream consumers, they can wrap their heads around that concept. It's about like the infrastructure of like all the 2018 and the 2017 cryptocurrency stigma that comes with it that is presenting a lot of problems. So for us, bridging that gap and then doing it in like a parent safe way where everything's controlled, I think is really important. And by the way, you might think of the name Cryptoys and it'd be like, okay, careful, because there's crypto in the name. We actually like leaning into the conversation and just being like, hey, this is crypto, but in a friendly way. And let's show you why crypto can actually be a good thing. So remains to be seen how much people will accept it, but we're actually leaning full force into it and trying to change the narrative and the perception behind it.
Well, thank you for that on behalf of the industry. You know, it feels like it, again, comes down to this having a strong why. And for the outside world, why? Well, because it's this new tech called blockchain is not a good reason to spend $69 million on, you know, like an image or whatever. But when the answer is, well, look at all the money your kids are spending on their Fortnite skins, you know, and look at how much they love their LOL doll, but they don't get to show it off to their classmates because it's sitting at home in the toy pile. But now it's that why you're going to find very few people for whom aren't like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, you know, and it, yeah,
I think it's something all parents can relate to. So for example, I'll tell you a story. So we're Jewish, so we celebrate Hanukkah last December. And, you know, I asked my daughter what she wants for the 8th night of Hanukkah. And the 8th night's like the big night, right? The first 7 nights are like little like tchotchke gifts and whatnot. The 8th night's the big night. So like, for example, when I was a kid, I got a bike one year, got a trip to Orlando to Disney World. It was like the big gift, right? It's the big gift. So I asked my daughter, I said, sweetheart, what do you want for your 8th night of Hanukkah gift? And she goes, oh my God, Dad, I know what I want. She runs to her room immediately, grabs her iPad, and she's asking me to authorize an in-app purchase for $99 in her favorite iPad game. That was the big gift. The big, like once a year gift that she's going to get is an in-app purchase for digital items in her favorite iPad game. Now, first of all, I was surprised by that. But second of all, it would have been nice, because this is not the first time I bought digital items for her on the iPad. It would have been nice to say, okay, sure, happy to get you, you know, the $99 pack of digital items. But before we do that, why don't you go ahead and sell all the other items that we've bought over the years that you don't have a chance to play with? Or better yet, why don't you donate them to charity or to someone that can't afford them? Currently, she's unable to do either.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, I think when you tell parents about these concepts, immediately they get it, because there's nothing stopping the parent or the kid right now from going to the kid's room and saying, let's get a box of toys that you don't play with and either sell them on eBay or donate them to Goodwill or to charity. They have free control over these items because they're their items. And as the world gets more and more digital, like it or not, that's where we're heading. We need to offer the same empowerment for people that are spending the same amount of money, if not more, in the digital world. So
100%.
I think parents and kids can kind of grasp that concept more. They can just talk about NFTs at a technical level.
And that gets back to the point that you made, that I had made, around like, we need to get away from it being speculative, where it's like the goal for that is not that she makes a bunch of money on those previous items she owned. It's helping to offset the cost of it. It's just a little extra compensation. It's just offsetting the original cost of it, much like selling something at a garage sale. You're not recouping the original value. You're offsetting the cost of what you once spent on it for something you don't need anymore. And it's such a no-brainer.
Right. And it's interesting because, again, we're not applying the same ownership that we do in the physical world, like by default mentally, than we do in the digital world. So for example, like video games are a great example of this. And I know there's like rights and digital rights and whatnot, but let's like think about this at a high level, right? I can go and I can buy a copy of Halo, the video game, right? The physical copy. I can get that copy either on Amazon or go to GameStop. If I buy the physical copy, I can do whatever I want with it. I can go give it to a friend. I could sell it back to GameStop. I can put it on eBay. I can do whatever. If I buy the same copy digitally for the same amount of money, $59.99, cost me $59.99 at GameStop, cost me $59.99 digitally, I have no rights to it whatsoever, the same amount of money. And to me, that's fundamentally broken, right? If I'm paying the same amount of money for the same piece of content, I should be able to give it to someone else. And right now, we just don't treat digital citizens like we do people in the physical world. And I think the worlds are combining. And frankly, I don't think the next generation is going to settle for it. So that's
Absolutely
why I think I think kids are going to look at us like we were crazy. My kids are going to say, wait a second, Dad, you mean to tell me that you spent 80 hours playing that game, getting digital items, and didn't actually own the items they gave you? Like, to them, it's going to be doing? Like a foreign. Exactly.
You idiot.
Exactly. It's going to be a foreign concept to them. You know?
Well, and what's exciting to me is seeing how, the mainstream big players get this as well and are moving into it. And Mattel being a great example. Why don't you tell us about the Mattel partnership? How did that come together and what is it practically speaking?
Oh, sure. So, we were introduced to Mattel by, mutual connection. So we got a chance to meet with them, and, we were fortunate to meet with a lot of the big toy companies early on as we, raised some funding, and we became known as like the digital toy company. Like Cryptoys was like going all in through the angle of toys. So I think we attracted the attention of a lot of the, the legacy toy companies. So we chatted with all of them, and it was just clear from day one that Mattel set itself apart from the rest because they were like leaning in 100% into where like the future of toys was heading, the future of play, and they knew that digital was going to be a big piece of this. And I think all the other toy companies were like, blockchain and the thing and the this and this is going to disrupt our business, and they were worried about how is digital going to bite into the physical sales and whatnot. Everybody was like, okay, we're required to take the Web3 call because everybody's telling us we need to learn about NFTs and Web3. But everybody was like trepidatious about it, and they were like, okay, let's do a small test, let's do a deployment. Mattel was like, no, we need to innovate, and if we have to disrupt ourselves, let's disrupt ourselves. And like, let's lean into this. Like, clearly digital is a big piece of the future of play, and we want to partner with the folks that really believe that as well. So it was just clear from day one, the energy around those conversations, what they were thinking was aligned with how we were thinking. And it was a great partnership. Just as we were discussing what that would look like, not only did we work on a licensing deal together, but it was around the same time that we were raising our Series A financing, and they invested in the company as well. Wow. So they're not just a licensing partner, but they're also shareholders of the company. So it's a truly aligned partnership, and they've been fantastic supporters from day one. So we're working with them. We already announced it on the Masters of the Universe toy line, which is launching, sometime in the next couple of months here, shortly after we launch our Genesis line. And we got a number of other stuff that we're working behind the scenes that we can't announce just yet, but we'll be announcing soon. And they've been just absolutely fantastic on every phase.
And so that licensing deal looks like basically they've licensed the Masters of the Universe IP to you and there's a Cryptoys, right? And Cryptoys in turn then is going to take those characters, turn them into digital collectibles, and give them a similar unboxing experience, et cetera, that we just described with the Cryptoys themselves. Is that the basis?
That's exactly right. So I think you've seen like corollaries, like if you've seen like Funko Pops and stuff
exactly
like
what
that,
I was going
right?
to say. Yeah.
Right. Like you kind of see that. And then a lot of people think that we're a digital Funko Pop in a sense, but we kind of take it a little bit beyond that. We're doing gaming and entertainment and all these different play patterns.
And original IP, which I don't know if Funko Pop does.
Not sure exactly. No, we're focused a lot on the original lore and the IP of the platform. A lot of people have compared us to an NFT native Nintendo in a sense where, Nintendo started off with their own characters, Mario, Luigi, Donkey Kong, and Zelda. And we have our own lore and IP as well, but very similar in that sense. So yeah, Masters of the Universe will be the first line. And then there's all these experiences that you'll be able to take these toys. You can collect them, build out your collection, but then you could also play with them in different ways. And some really fun stuff behind the scenes. And, I'm a huge fan of the episodes that you guys have done with John Rogers. John's super smart guy. And, actually we connected thanks to you a few weeks back. And, a lot of the stuff that you guys talked about is how do brands kind of get into this space in the right way, right? Because it's very tricky. We've seen a lot of drops go wrong. And again, I think it's directly correlated to, again, the precipice that you mentioned that we keep referring to is like, we got to get beyond this being a speculative investment first and foremost, because fans are smart and they could smell a cash grab from a mile away. And if this is just a speculative flip or et cetera, like they'll revolt against that. What you really have to lean into is like building community in an authentic way with the fans of that particular IP. Yep. So, with Masters of the Universe, like we're reaching out constantly on a daily basis to super fans of that line, people that grew up with that IP in the 80s, like watch Saturday morning cartoons with a bowl of cereal and like showing them behind the scenes, like, hey, like this is the stuff that we're working on. What do you think about this? How could we do this better? And we think of it like a love letter to the fans of that IP. We don't think of it like, hey, buy this and hopefully you'll be able to 3X, a week from now, or if you get in early, you could 10X it 2 months from now. Like there's none of that talk. As a matter of fact, we actually don't even say the words NFT very much at all. Like when we talk to people, like we do it in an educational space, but we shift the conversation away from that because I think NFT is just the technical infrastructure of it. You got to go back to, like you mentioned, the why. And what's the point of all this, right? What's the use cases behind it? How do I enjoy this as a fan? And that's what we start with.
What has been the reaction or the feedback from Master of the Universe fans?
Well, I think, again, you start with the shared sentiment, because I'm a fan of the line, right? I grew up in the 80s and my older brother was really into He-Man and Masters of the Universe. So I just remember like looking up to him and he was like the big He-Man Star Wars guy. So I was just sharing like my memories of that as a kid. And all the people that worked on the line here at Cryptoys and the artists, they also grew up in the 80s and were big fans. Like to them to work on this line is like pinch me moments all around. And there's this certain just like warmth and like wholesomeness of like working with something that matters so much to you. And just showing them like kind of these stories and how we're building it. Like there's all these little like Easter eggs that you would know if you kind of were fans of that IP that are present inside of the Cryptoys and the unboxing experience and the whole thing that we have planned. They've been huge supporters of what we're building. We want to talk to more folks, but the early folks that we've shared this to is like, this makes sense. And 100% I would buy this. They basically said this would be my first NFT. So they go like, I think there's an aha moment. It's like, okay, see, this makes sense because it's analogous to like a toy or a collectible, not what they've seen. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of like, PFPs and Bored Apes. As you can see, I got my apes right there. Like I'm a huge fan of it, but it doesn't correlate to like mainstream consumers in the sense that like, they have a corollary to match this to, but they can match it to stuff from their childhood or to toys or whatnot. So far the reaction's been very positive.
There is a brand new staking feature in the Ledger Live app today. We all like staking the assets that we're bullish on, and now you can stake 7 different coins inside the Ledger Live app. Cosmos, Polkadot, Tron, Algorand, Tezos, Solana, and of course Ethereum. With Ledger Live, you can take money from your bank account, buy your most bullish crypto asset, and stake that asset to its network, all inside the Ledger Live app. Through a partnership with Figment, Ledger also lets you choose which validator you want to stake your assets with. And Ledger is running its own validating nodes, offering a convenient way to participate in network validation, and it even comes with slashing insurance. Ledger Live is truly becoming the battle station for the bankless world, so go download Ledger Live. If you have a Ledger already, you probably already have it, and get started securely staking your crypto assets. COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses who need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage their treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the extremely secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasuries to expressive, flexible, multi-chain features such as global user management, global contracts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization. COINSHIFT layers on powerful treasury management tools on top of the proven security of Gnosis Safe, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Messari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. In DeFi, you have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless.
You know, strikingly, and this is like a deeply anecdotal, might mean nothing point, but it's something John Rogers and I have actually looked at together, which is some of these properties that have been licensed. And the one that's coming to mind is Looney Tunes. That may not be this, again, the concept here is correct, whether the specific project, whether Looney Tunes is the right specific example. If you look, like the drops themselves of like, hey, Looney Tunes partnered with XYZ and just did a bunch of NFTs were very mixed. The FunkoPop NFTs of like the collectible looking characters actually have historically done better. Now, again, the size of the drops may have varied, but like that was something I took note of. And John and I both looked at like, oh, wow, these FunkoPop NFTs that are like very collectible, kind of cartoony looking versions of whatever IP they partnered with, it seemed like they've had more success than even just like the whatever. I don't want to call anybody out, but other drops of that IP.
Absolutely. And there's interesting kind of, if you look into that, like, why is that, right? Because it starts with like fandom and collectability first and foremost, right? Like there's a mindset of collection. There's a mindset of like, you know, what is the collector's mindset? There's completionists. There are people that like to collect things for the joy of collecting. Like if you look at a Funko Pop collector, and by the way, hats off to Funko for what they built. I'm a huge fan of the company. I collect Funko Pops with my kid. You know, we're getting into that as a little hobby, right? Nobody buys Funko Pops, or I shouldn't say nobody, but the majority of people that buy Funko Pops, they're not buying it focused on like, oh my God, this is worth $100. This is worth $500. This is worth $1,000. They buy it for the sheer joy of collecting and the feeling they get when they look at their Ninja Turtle Funko Pop, or you know, they look at their Masters of the Universe Funko Pop, right? There's a joy and an ethos behind that. And it's not based in like speculation or flipping or money, right? It just changes the conversation. And Funko's built a great brand around that. And I think, you know, that's why you kind of see the NFT drops be successful. And it's interesting because the mainstream Ethereum NFT community doesn't even pay attention to that stuff, right? You don't even hear it talked about on Twitter. You know, Mattel did a super successful drop with Hot Wheels a number of months ago, right? Nobody talks about that because it wasn't baked in like the Ethereum ethos and PFPs and whatnot, which gets all the attention. So it's really interesting. If you kind of dig behind the scenes, it's not what's getting like the retweets and all the press, but there are some utility-based NFTs that are becoming very, very successful. And I think we're going to start to see them bubble up more so in the next like few months here in this next wave.
Really interesting. The other thing that I know Mattel as a company is doubling down on in a huge way is entertainment and IP around their toys. I think they're coming out with like a Magic 8-Ball movie and an Uno movie. Like they're creating franchise and like, you know, entertainment properties around games that you don't even think of as like a natural fit for that. Barbie's the big example. Everybody probably knows the Barbie movie's coming out, Barbie being a huge Mattel property. It feels like that's the way the world is moving, is like everything has to have kind of story to kind of capture the imagination of the user. Otherwise we just move on. Talk about and maybe like the origins of determining that you guys needed to have lore, how you're thinking about that, where it falls in the timeline, et cetera.
Yeah. So like, again, like I mentioned, we have 3 pillars to the company. We have toys and collectibles, gaming, and entertainment. And entertainment, it's like a throughput behind everything that you're doing, right? You have to have captivating stories so that the games resonate more, so the toys, you know, captivate more, et cetera. So storytelling is a huge aspect of the project. And if you look at like the big successes, like, Nintendo and Mario had a story behind what he did. There was an objective, right? If you look at like Master Universe, I'll use them again as a great example. Master Universe, Mattel built a line of toys, but they also created an amazing Saturday morning cartoon that you were able to watch and get involved. So that would kind of feed into
That's a good selling from the shelf Transformers example, of like,
exactly, right? Yeah. You got it. So for us, it was really important that that narrative drove a lot of what we were doing. And, I think storytelling is, again, it's interesting because the space, again, this is something that happened after the fact. You would mint a project and then you would figure out the storyline and build the storyline after. And again, we wanted to do everything with story as a foundational element, with entertainment and collectability as a foundational element, and kind of holistically tie it together. Again, a lot of the stuff that legacy toy companies have done successfully, legacy video game companies have done, to set yourself apart in a space that's crowded, you need compelling story. And again, this is not something that we just wanted to be a video game company. We didn't want to just be a toy company. We wanted to be an entertainment company, and you need good storytelling to do that.
Is this where Beanie Babies went wrong? Like, people love to point out Beanie Babies, like NFTs or Beanie Babies. It's like this weird fad that's going to flame out. And I don't know what attempts were made on the Beanie Baby side to create like TV shows, but like, it strikes me that was what was missing. They even had little bits of stories and those little tags that you could open, but they didn't actually create like media properties around them, as far as I know. Like, is that what went wrong?
I don't know too much about the Beanie Babies. So I wasn't a huge Beanie Baby person as a kid. I think with Beanie Babies, there was so many of them. And I think, there are so many different variants and whatnot that it's tough to artificially create after the fact, after the hysteria and after the rise of them. You then artificially try to put the storyline in it. I think the best stories live on when storytelling is organic and foundational, like day one, and then you build everything out from there, versus the other way around. It's kind of feeding story.
Was this literally day one for you? Like, oh, I have this idea for Cryptoys. They're gonna mimic these surprise dolls that my daughter loves so much, and there's gonna be story? Or was it like a year in when you're like, oh, we're really making a company here, we'll have to incorporate story into this? Or where did it actually fall?
Oh, from day one, again, once Freddie joined the team and Freddie came in with, he came from Disney and Konami and 3D art and animation, we're like, okay, this needs to be an animated series. We really got to create like a brand around this whole thing. And it was something we wanted to do from day one. Again, as 4 co-founders working part-time, there's only so much that we can do. So we started building out everything in Unity and doing the art and animation, and then the NLP and the app. But we knew as soon as we had the bandwidth, we're going to be building a lot of storytelling into this. And it was really after, we raised our pre-seed round and we're able to really kind of now do this full time and kind of see kind of where the space was at the moment, and then kind of weave in all the things that we wanted to see foundationally from a storytelling perspective, that we wanted to bring that in. And I was a huge, still am a huge Guardians of the Galaxy fan. And I was always kind of captivated with this opening scene in Guardians of the Galaxy where, you see him, for the first time, he puts on the mask, he gets out like the blaster, and then he puts on a cassette of like an old school 80s cassette tape of like old school 80s music. And I always just love the combination of past meets future. So we wanted to bring that into the storyline. And again, if these things are like old school, video games from the 80s, and they find themselves in present day on the blockchain, and they're, trying to discover this new world, I thought, how many fun things could we do with that as like the foundational story? You could bring in new characters, you can kind of tie things around nostalgically. So that's when we introduced all that.
So you started teasing. If folks watch, I actually retweeted it. The like kind of there's like a launch video. It appears like, or that tells the story of like, it's very Stranger Things ish in the 80s thing, or even Ready Player One has a lot of like Stranger or 80s references to it, and it's like this old 80s arcade, and then they get blasted into like a hole in the universe or whatever. I'm sure there's a technical term, and they kind of end up in this new arcade world that is this, where what I'm assuming the kind of arcade in Cryptoys world will look like, which is super cool. Do you actively have like story writers right now, like hacking away at like a pilot script? Wow. Is like a movie or a TV show? Like what can you tell us?
I can't say too much, but it's in active development right now. Okay. And we're talking with some amazing people in Hollywood that want to take this thing to the next level. We have a full-time writer on the team who has previous experience with one of the most popular cartoon shows. I can't name exact names, but she was a writer on that series. And, she's helping write the pilot. We actually just have the pilot and the pitch deck. We're sending it out to a bunch of folks actually this week. So we're taking that to the next level for sure.
So one of my questions, but now given how real this is, I don't know if you can answer it, is like, do you have a dream director, a dream voice actor that would be attached to this project, like in your just like hypothetical fantasy land?
That's a tough question to answer. It's hard because there could be multiple fits, depending on if we turn this, right now it's scheduled as an animated series, but a lot of folks have said, hey, this actually could be a full-fledged movie. And with that could become, a totally different fit for a totally different kind of studio or place. So I'd rather not name names only because we're in so many frequent conversations.
I get it.
But yeah, we're excited about all the possibilities for sure.
Yeah. And I think you basically made this point, and perhaps it's an obvious one, but like the story and the lore is so important, because if you're doing these like arcade mini games, there's going to be no moat around the mechanics of the games you're building. I'm sure they're very basic. You could go play a similar kind of mechanic. The moat becomes the story, and the moat becomes the character you are, and wanting to play as your Cryptoy or whatever other pieces. Sounds like maybe you wanted to caveat me on that, but.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big, like a lot of the things we're doing is around casual gaming and making things simple. Like I think, there are other folks in the space that are focused on like the MMORPG, metaverse, Ready Player One style. Hey, this is me. And it's almost like a real looking environment, kind of like, again, what Yuka's doing, right? With Improbable and all the amazing stuff that they're doing there. Incredible. And that's more like a World of Warcraft MMORPG looking kind of game. We're focused more on the casual gaming audience, games like people can play for like 10, 15 minutes at a time. And again, all ages. Like I won't say my wife's age here on the podcast because she'd get very upset with me, but we're parents. We have 3 kids. My wife plays Candy Crush for a lot per day, and so she plays Toon Blast and all these other casual games. So again, we're kind of focused on building an all ages gaming platform. Kind of Nintendo's a good comparison because kids love Mario and Nintendo, and so do we. We love Mario and Nintendo as well. So we're focused around that. And then the idea is to build a holistic platform where you could do a lot of different things on it. And as you build out your collection and as you play more games and you progress in the ecosystem, more functionality, is enabled, and you're able to kind of, do different things with. So we hope that will keep people onto the platform and onto the ecosystem, just because we're continually releasing new and fresh experiences for.
Yeah. It reminds me in some ways like of like a Club Penguin. Like you were talking about how your son comes home and plays Roblox. I mean, that was, I don't know, 8th grade for me probably or something. And it was only a couple of months in my world, right? But it was like that. I came home and all my friends were on Club Penguin and I was on Club Penguin, and there were little games I think you could do and, whatever. I think that is an early example. So this gets us to, how do you think about longevity? And it strikes me that lore would be a big part of this. Club Penguin for me flamed out really quickly, but even in general, eventually was just kind of shut down a couple years after. Like, do you worry about that with attention spans being what they are? How do you think about not just flaming out after a year or two of hype?
Yeah. So I think, again, what's great about what we're building, and we hope it will resonate with people, is we know for a fact we don't have all the answers in our hypothesis. We have a good framework for what we want to build, and so a toyetic experience and what the future of digital toys and play looks like. But we're going to need the involvement from the community. And if you look at the mini games that we're producing, these are games that we're making internally, and some we're making with partners in gaming studios. And we're constantly going to be releasing fresh experiences. So if things feel stale, or if folks, have ideas for a new game, or there's a new concept that they want to see, we can quickly iterate on that, build it, and ship it out. And what's great is, again, if you think of us, again, as a digital toy company, forget about as an NFT project. Think of us like a digital toy company. A toy company can always iterate on new methods of play and new lines of toys, different partnerships and IP. So again, I can't name names, but you're going to see a bunch of announcements from us with like household names that will be able to announce in the next few months, that'll have their own lines of Cryptoys. And with those lines of Cryptoys will come fresh new experiences and different forms of play that could always keep things interesting. So, it's on us to continue to innovate and bring forward value to the consumer. But also we want to make sure that the community is very involved in bringing those ideas to the forefront so we can build for them. So community involvement is a huge piece of what we're building alongside our fans. Are
there active plans for physicals of the toys?
Yeah, I can't say, anything on the pod right now, but I'd say obviously we have an incredible partner that has a lot of experience in physical. So when the timing's right, you might see physical Cryptoys out there for sure.
Part of the reason I ask, and again, it all ties to why I'm just very optimistic about y'all, because a lot of, from the concept to then the execution, it seemed really good. Like, these things are freaking cute. Like, I look at them and I'm like, I want to like squeeze it. You know what I mean? Like, I want to touch the thing. And so I have that very immediate reaction to the little characters. So I'm just like, when physical, ironically, I'm like,
thank you so much.
I want my physical Cryptoy.
I think there's some really cool concepts that we're talking about in that, with obviously if you collect a certain amount of Cryptoys, we'll actually send one out to you and things like that. We can't announce anything just yet, but a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we're thinking about on that front.
So let's close here with some of the more technical stuff. You mentioned you're building on Flow. Obviously, CryptoKitties was a huge part of the inspiration for all of this. But really, how did you make the decision to build on Flow as opposed to Ethereum, say?
Yeah, so for us, we're focused on building a mainstream platform. So it was really important that we were able to onboard folks that have no blockchain or crypto experience whatsoever. And if you look at the folks that have been able to do that incredibly successful, look no further than Dapper Labs and what they did with NBA Top Shot, right? I attribute to what Dapper Labs did with NBA Top Shot as the catalyst that started everything with this last bull run, right? It was really like the first project to introduce NFTs and the concept of digital collectibles to a big audience of sports fans and fantasy fans, et cetera. Obviously, the trading card market was blowing up at the time, and there was a good kind of on-ramp for folks. And then folks dived into Ethereum and whatnot. But the ability to go on with a credit card and buy something with no MetaMask wallet or knowing what a gas fee is incredibly important. So that was number one, easy on-ramp for folks. The other thing is having a great partner in general. Like Dapper Labs are just fantastic partners. Not only did they invest in the company, but we work alongside them on licensing deals and a lot of different opportunities. So they've just been a phenomenal business partner to be involved with. And then 3, we think it provides the best user experience, on the market, frankly, from like just getting to be a user on a platform, signing up, and then getting the actual collectible. So my whole theory with blockchain and which blockchain to choose from is that for the most part, and obviously there's going to be exceptions to this, for the most part, if you look at like 5-10 years from now, the blockchain is not really going to matter at the end of the day. What's going to matter most, in my opinion, just my opinion, is that you do 3 things right. Number 1, the user experience is phenomenal. 2, that fees are incredibly low, and 3, that the user has true ownership and liquidity of the asset. And if you achieve those 3 things, the blockchain that you choose kind of fades into the distance. Because I think, if you look back at like this happened in Web 2, like my previous company, Live Ninja, I remember specifically, I would ask folks like about different kind of programming languages, and we coded our first initial prototype in PHP. And they would ask like, oh, what are you coding in? And I'd say, oh, I'm building in PHP. And they're like, PHP? Wait, you're not building in Ruby or Python? Like, oh, you're not going to make it, bro. Like, it has to be Ruby or Python. Now, if you look at like 10 years later, does any consumer go to a website and wonder what coding stack it's built on? No, they just care that it's a great user experience on the website. And I think that's where we're going to head with Web3 applications. But the user experience has to be first and foremost phenomenal. And then again, gas fees or any fees whatsoever has to be low. And then ownership and liquidity is important, right? You have to be able to, if you wanted to sell it, right? And it's not going to sit in the market forever. So we're just focused on nailing those 3. And I think Flow gives us the best chance to do that.
I think folks have misinterpreted me on this podcast before, because I've talked a lot about, are we going to live in an omni-chain world? And initially saying like, for sure, it's just going to be multi-chain and nobody will care. And then diving deeper into some of this and being like, oh, wow, but I really understand how Ethereum scales and I don't really understand how bridging works. And so, maybe if all the network effects accrue to one chain that's scaling really well, like maybe it does just become an ETH dominant world. And then I go back to being like, I think you're probably right. It doesn't matter. So I'm a little bit agnostic about that, but I have been outspoken about like thinking doodles should stay on the Ethereum ecosystem, because I do worry about bifurcating their brand right now and losing liquidity in their brand. And people have interpreted that as being like anti-Flow, because that's, of course, the debate is like, will they go on Flow or will they settle on Ethereum? I don't actually mean it anti-Flow. I mean it for that particular project and that particular use case. I don't know. And I trust the Doodles team. They'll make the right call. But like to me, I think they should stay on Ethereum and settle on Ethereum. For you and what you're doing, I totally hear that. And it really makes a lot of sense, I think, to be on Flow. And so for all the people out there who think I like hate Flow, here, I'm conceding. I think there are great use cases for Flow. And I think this is a really good example of one that kicks off from the start, focusing on family, onboarding, easy, good partnership, et cetera, et cetera. So is there anything like any takeaways from the Flow ecosystem you would say, whether you're like, if you're thinking about building on it, here's what you should know, or these are some projects I'm excited about in the Flow ecosystem?
I'll tell you this, as an entrepreneur building on the Flow blockchain, number one, if you're building a company or a project and you're considering it, just know getting like a Web 2 dev and introducing them to Cadence, right, which is Flow's programming language, is incredibly easy for them to transfer over, right? It's not like something where there's like a big learning curve. Like if you have a really good like developer in Web 2, they could easily adopt this and learn this pretty quickly. So it's a great like way for them to jump over, which if you're building a project and looking for devs to build, I think that's a big perk. Two, if you're looking for licensing deals and it's important for you to do IP deals with brands, Flow gives you a big leg up. Why? Because a lot of brands, like it or not, if there's truths to it or half truths or whatnot, a lot of brands perceive the environmental impact of a project on the blockchain, right? Like the negative press that they'll get because blockchain is perceived as bad for the environment. Flow just did a whole study where it basically showed, I don't know the exact number, but basically like if you're minting something on the Flow blockchain, it's like the equivalent of like 4 Google searches from an energy consumption perspective. And believe it or not, that stuff mattered when we were closing licensing and IP deals. So these are things to really consider. And then I think also there's a lot of like decentralization maximalists, right? Like, oh, it has to be fully decentralized, not your keys, not your crypto and all this stuff. And to an extent, I think that's very valuable in the space. I think decentralization is really important. There's also some advantages to having a partner that you can go to for help in certain things and building applications and businesses that can scale to potentially millions of users. As much as I love Ethereum and there's stuff that incredible stuff that's being built on that, everybody's kind of just building off decentralized in their own little individual islands, right? Sure, you have layer 2s and things like that can be helpful, but it's been an amazing experience, like working alongside a company like Dapper, who can help you really push the ball forward in different phases of the company to try to make a big impact and to take a big swing to produce something really, really great. So that's just a few things that I would mention to anybody considering building on Flow or any other blockchain. Like, look at what the advantages of the ecosystem are. Like, I'm not just going to be here on the top of a mountain talking about Flow, which I absolutely love, but like, I know Solana's doing a lot of cool things. Polygon's obviously making a lot of strides. I know you're doing a lot of cool stuff with Immutable. They're crushing it as well. So really kind of like look into the ecosystem and see what they offer and then make the best choice for you.
Yeah. Flow, IMX, and Polygon right now I'm like eyeing as I think really, and each taking different approaches, although I guess Polygon and IMX are actually Polygon's now really becoming a layer 2. So similar approaches, arguably, from that standpoint. But I think are have a lot of potential and each fill needs in the ecosystem. Okay, last question. Yeah. I think it is a no-brainer that there is going to be a massive, call it probably multi-billion-dollar company that will come out of the space you're building in, right? This like start with sort of digital toys, digital collectibles that sell from the shelf, broaden into games and lore and whatever. And from my vantage point, I'm like, all right, it looks like it's gonna be you guys, like I think you're from what I see from the outside, of course, like it seems like, it all looks great. You obviously are internally, so you know the trials and tribulations on a day-to-day level. So if that didn't pan out, if Cryptoys doesn't pan out for some reason, like what would it be? Like what is your biggest risk case right now in your opinion?
Such a great question. I think the biggest thing, whenever you're building consumer goods or, applications or whatnot, and it's just involving consumers, it's always a risk because consumers, you can like look at like some of the movies that get made. You can have like $100 million budgets and on script, they look absolutely fantastic and they can hit all the marks and they get approved. Oh, this is gonna be the biggest movie ever. And flops at the box office. Or a video game, right? We see this all the time with big video game studios. You could spend 5 years, 10 years building a huge game. And then all of a sudden, millions of dollars of budget, just the game doesn't hit, it doesn't resonate. So I think any entrepreneur that's into consumer, just the space in general and building consumer apps and consumer games and products, you have to just make sure that you're talking to the consumer and researching, and you got to hit your mark.
It has to connect.
I think that's the biggest risk, is that, you miss the mark from a consumer perspective and what they really want. So the onus is on us. And I think one of the benefits that Web3 projects have is they're very community driven, where before, if you think about people like making like real physical consumer goods, it's a very like big feedback cycle to like involve a community and get feedback and iterate and kind of change on the dime. But here with digital and Web3, everything's built with a community centric approach. So I like to think the onus is on us to make sure the community stays involved, and we're building stuff directly for them. So I think that's the biggest kind of key marker that I like to hone in on. And that's the biggest kind of indicator for success, is it resonating with the community.
Well, thank you so much, Will. Thanks for hopping on the pod. I'm sure we'll check in with you. We'll have you back in I don't know when it'll be, maybe a year, maybe 3 years, maybe sooner than that, but just to track your progress. Again, I think this is awesome what you're doing, and frankly, great for the space as a whole. So thanks for coming.
Awesome. Thank you, Carly. Honored to be here.
Hey, don't go anywhere. If you've made it this far, we have a special surprise for you. Will is offering to let Overpriced JPEGs listeners into the early private beta for Cryptoys, which is being rolled out over the next couple of weeks. So if you just listened to this whole episode and you're now here, congratulations. If you DM at Cryptoys, we'll put the link below, on Twitter, and you DM them Overpriced JPEGs, their team will make sure that you get into the early private beta for Cryptoys to mint the early Cryptoys NFTs and characters. So hopefully I didn't fangirl too much during this interview, but you can tell I'm a big fan of what they're building. I'm pretty optimistic and bullish on their project. Hopefully you are too, having listened to this episode. And so I think this is an awesome opportunity. If you are a listener of Overpriced JPEGs, DM at Cryptoys Overpriced JPEGs to get access to the early private beta. Thanks, Will. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.